Hello, in this video I am going to talk about a recipe that I have been working on for the last couple of days. I wanted something that was both aggressive in lower time frames but also defensive so that it didn't take up too many positions. Here is a recipe that I came up with. It uses the Rule 37 parabolic stop and reverse and DCA. Let's talk about Rule 37. And let's clean this up a little. Rule 37 is my own mathematical equation. It's a unique approach to looking at the market. And as you can see, it completely avoided this whole drop. Now, when I was building this and I started working on it, I didn't expect today's unusual market activity, which we can see right here. This was a bit of a surprise. And notice Rule 37 completely skips this whole mess. So let's look at the settings. The slow line or lower line is completely ignored. Only the fast line and the upper level is in concern. So it's a length of 73 using a zero lag EMA. There's no inversion or anything along that nature. It looks to pick up a signal when the line changes directions. In this case, when it goes from a downward trend to an upward trend, that is a buy signal. It's very simple and complete. A sell signal is when it goes from an upward trend to a downward trend. Now this isn't a good example because a level market is not very visible. So let's see if we can find a good market to demonstrate this. Okay, right here. It goes from upward to level or slightly downward, so it indicated a sell signal. So that is the Rule 37. It's a very simple approach that traps and captures market momentum and a path of least resistance movement. It's a very, very simplistic algorithm, but very effective when it deals with dropping in large amounts of price action. So let's go back over here. Let's zoom this in as well. So let's go back to this morning's drop that seemed to catch a lot of people in surprise. Now remember, when you're doing any kind of a moving average, you're not going to make a purchase down here. This is not where purchases take place. The actual price action is where purchases take place. So this was a bit of a wash if you were trading on this by itself. Catching down here would have been better, but there would have been a risk of being caught here. So the Rule 37 avoids that by waiting for the market to change direction through the average itself. So there you have the process of Rule 37. It is and can be very aggressive, or it can be very long term. It all depends on what you want. Of course, second, we have classic parabolic SAR. Parabolic stop and reverse. Now I have this set up slightly different than normal. That is a little more restrictive and more narrow than a normal parabolic saw, because I want to try to squeeze out those small tiny bumps in the candlestick. And in the 1 minute chart it's very difficult to see. But if you zoom in, you can kind of see where the trigger points take place. The ideal here is not to catch every single peak and valley, but to catch a very limited range and very specific range. And finally, dollar cost averaging. This is an accumulation recipe, but as you can see, it's not all that aggressive at accumulations. It does have higher than normal, but it's not complicit in terms of insanity. So roughly 10% of your maximum purchases. Okay, let's take this. Okay, for a quick and crude way of reading this, this is 10% of your position size. So if your position size is $10, then one trading cycle, and I should say time frame, this duration, roughly 3.5 days, or whatever the statistics module tells you, you will make 10% of your initial position size. Now, if my position size is $10, then every 3 days or so, it will produce roughly 10 cents. Of course, I do have that information down here with the statistics module. Okay, it is 16.9 days long, 5 trade cycles, an average of 14 positions. So that gives you a good, clear basis of what to expect on this. It's semi-aggressive, but it's still very good. Now, I will put a link to this chart in the description below. But now that we've looked at this a little bit, let's actually go look at some coins. And I don't know that ADA is a good choice in coins, even though it's one of my favorites, unless you have the budget to sustain the number of positions on average. But the one thing I do want to do before we go too far is show you how this recipe changes with different time frames. I'm going to go to the statistics module. So you can see it does fairly well. So now we're about 3 months here of data. Let's go back to March of 2020. Okay, here we go. Let's bring up the other chart. March of 2020 was a nightmare for a lot of people. This recipe simply didn't care. In fact, it sold off right before everything went down the drain and picked up down here. We have a purchase here, then we averaged it all the way out down here. But you notice it made a sale right here. Most recipes took months to recover. This combination did unusually well. Let's go find some more coins. Some coins that are difficult to deal with. Okay, March 2020, again the same pattern, except here it bought in and it sold off here, and it didn't get back in at all till down here. So the defensive properties of the Rule 37 are quite impressive. Parabolic SAR helps weed out a lot of unwanted signals. And with its narrow range, you can see just how well the combined effort here with the Rule 37 and Parabolic SAR got in, rode the wave, got out. Very minimal amount of time. And that's what we really want, limited amount of time. You'll also notice limited amount of positions on all of your time frames. Here, it only had 2 positions max on a coin that normally is heavy accumulation. So let's get down to let's just go for the brutal coins right away. We all know this coin racks up the positions, and yet here it didn't. And it did very good profits. Here's another coin. Poor history, difficult to work with, but this one pulled off an incredible amount of trade cycles. 8% profit for the last one with an average of 5. Let's go down to a coin that just keeps on taking. Raven. This coin has a way of draining budgets faster than a leaky bucket. And yet it is limited and controlled very easily. So as you can see, this recipe is both limiting and aggressive at the same time. That's really what you want. You don't want a recipe that's going to be difficult to work with. Average here, 4%. Bat is a good coin, but it's often difficult to work with. Now let's go back to the 1 minute, and let's look at this chart. 10 positions, 9 trade cycles. Not bad. Of course, here is its chart. Let's zoom this out. Notice it simply avoided the entire drop altogether. Again, the filtering, the parabolic stop and reverse really helped with this situation. Bitcoin Cash, another one that is tedious to work with. Now this one was already in a trade cycle, but you'll notice that the actual next purchase completely avoided this cascade and waited for it to normalize out. The combination of parabolic SAR and Rule 37 are a very good filtering process that still gives you very good quality trades on a regular basis. BTC is another example. Max buys per cycle is a little high, and it's at its height right now. But 9 trade cycles on a 1 minute period. 18% of your single position. Of course, you could take 18% times 7 as a rough estimate of your profits for the whole time frame if you want. Another coin that has a difficult history, but still does reasonably well with this recipe. So let's recap. Rule 37. Very simple. Very easy to use. And it does very simply follow the path of least resistance with the market. When the market changes directions, that's when it signals. It uses only the fast line and ignores anything in the slow lines. Parabolic stop and reverse. Normally, this is 0.2. I have it reduced to half that so that I can cut or restrict the window that it functions in. And finally, dollar cost averaging. Now I have a very simple take profit. In and out, no big deal. But you can go with strategy if you want higher exposure. And of course, you get slightly higher profit as well. I personally don't want the exposure with the way this market is, so I'm all too happy just to take my profit and go home. Very simple, no deviation, completely strategy driven. Flat 2% take profit, simple and easy to work with. And there you have it. A recipe that does very well with this rather tedious and unpredictable market. Until next time.